I should have known the moment he looked at me that my life was no longer my own. The rain hit hard against the windshield, each drop blurring the city into streaks of gold and gray as I gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, my knuckles pale, my pulse loud enough to drown out the low hum of the engine. This was it. 20 miles outside the city, one tank of gas, a burner phone in my pocket, and a plan that had taken me 3 weeks to build and exactly 3 seconds to feel like it was already falling apart. I exhaled slowly, forcing my shoulders to relax, telling myself I wasn't running from him, just stepping away. That's what normal people did. They left situations that felt wrong, that felt too big, too consuming. They walked away. But nothing about Victor Moretti had ever been normal. I swallowed, the memory of his voice threading through my thoughts like something that didn't belong there and yet refused to leave, low and steady, never raised, never rushed, the kind of voice that didn't need to demand attention because it already owned it. I shook my head sharply, eyes back on the road. Don't think about him. Not now. Not when I was this close. The city lights were fading behind me, replaced by long stretches of empty highway, the kind that made you feel like you could disappear if you just kept driving. That was the point. Disappear. No forwarding address, no calls, no looking back. I tightened my grip again, breath catching for half a second as a familiar unease crept up my spine, subtle at first, like a whisper I couldn't quite hear. You're being paranoid, I told myself. He doesn't know. He can't know. I planned this perfectly. Every detail, every exit, every second accounted for. And yet, my eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. Nothing. Just darkness and the faint glow of distant headlights miles back. I let out a quiet, almost laugh, the kind that didn't quite sound real. See, fine. You're fine. But the feeling didn't leave. It settled deeper instead, coiling tight in my chest, turning each breath just a little too sharp. Because the truth was, Victor didn't need to chase people. He didn't need to raise his voice or make threats or send men after you in the middle of the night. He simply decided. And once he decided, things had a way of falling exactly where he wanted them to. I pressed harder on the gas without realizing it, the engine responding with a soft growl as the speed climbed, the road stretching out endlessly ahead of me. Freedom was supposed to feel lighter than this. It was supposed to feel like relief, like air finally filling your lungs after being held underwater. Instead, it felt like waiting. Waiting for something I couldn't see yet, but somehow knew was already there. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I froze. For a second, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't even think past the sudden spike of adrenaline that shot through me. No one had this number. No one. Slowly, like the smallest movement might trigger something irreversible, I pulled the phone out and glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Of course it was. My thumb hovered, hesitation sharp and immediate. Don't answer. Keep driving. Pretend it doesn't exist. That's what a smart person would do. I wasn't feeling very smart. I answered. Hello. Silence. Not the empty kind, but the kind that felt deliberate, measured. My chest tightened. I knew that silence. I'd learned it without meaning to. Then, finally, a voice. Calm. Familiar. Unhurried. Adrian. Victor said softly, like he'd been expecting me to pick up all along. My heart stopped. Not metaphorically. Not dramatically. It just stopped, then slammed back into motion so hard it made my vision blur. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because there was nothing left to say that wouldn't confirm exactly what I already knew. A quiet exhale came through the line, almost thoughtful. You made it 23 miles, he continued, the faintest hint of something unreadable threading through his tone. That's further than I expected. My grip on the wheel slipped slightly. The car drifted just enough to make me jerk it back into place, breath coming faster now, sharper. How? My voice broke, and I swallowed hard, forcing it steady. How do you know where I am? A pause. Not long. Just enough. Adrian, he said again, softer this time, almost patient. If you were going to leave. Another pause, this one heavier, settling into my bones before the words even came. You should have asked. The road ahead blurred. My pulse thundered in my ears. Because in that moment, it clicked into place with terrifying clarity. I hadn't escaped. I had been allowed to run. And somehow, that was worse. I did not realize I had slowed down until the car behind me honked, sharp and sudden, snapping me back into my body like a wire pulled too tight. My foot pressed the gas again automatically, but it felt useless now, like moving faster would not actually change anything. 23 miles. He knew the exact number. My throat felt dry, like I had swallowed dust. You are tracking me, I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew how weak they sounded, how small they were compared to the quiet certainty on the other end of the line. Victor did not answer right away. He never rushed answers. He let them settle, let the silence stretch just long enough to make you fill it with your own thoughts. My grip tightened on the phone, my other hand locked on the wheel, my shoulders rigid. If I were tracking you, he said finally, calm as ever, you would not have made it past the first intersection. My chest constricted. That was not a denial. That was worse than a confirmation. I swallowed again, my eyes flicking to the rearview mirror even though I knew it would not tell me anything useful. Then how? I pushed, my voice thinner now. How do you know? A soft sound came through the line. Not quite a laugh. Not quite a sigh. Something quieter, more personal. Because you are predictable when you are scared, he said. The words landed heavier than they should have. Predictable. I opened my mouth to argue, to deny it, but nothing came out. Because he was not wrong. I had taken the highway because it was the fastest way out. I had chosen distance over hiding. I had followed instinct, not strategy. And somehow he had known that. My foot eased off the gas without me meaning to. The car slowed, the engine humming lower, the road stretching out in front of me like it was waiting for a decision I had not made yet. Turn around, Victor said, and it was not a command. That was the problem. It did not sound like one. It sounded like a suggestion, like something reasonable, like he was offering me a choice that I already knew was not real. No, I said quickly, too quickly, the words sharp and defensive. No, I am not coming back. Silence again. Not empty. Never empty. It pressed against my ears, filled the space between each breath. Then, quieter, closer somehow, even through the phone. You think leaving changes anything? My fingers tightened around the wheel, the leather creaking faintly under the pressure. It changes everything. I shot back, even though my voice wavered at the edges. It means I am not part of this anymore. It means I get to decide where I go, what I do. The words sounded good, strong, almost convincing. Victor let them hang there for a second. 2, 3, long enough for doubt to slip in around the edges. Adrian, he said, and my name in his voice did something unsettling to my chest. Something steady and grounding and impossible to ignore. You were never part of this. My breath caught. That was not what I expected. Not an argument. Not a correction. Something else. Something that felt closer. You were mine long before you understood where you were standing. The world narrowed for a second. The road, the rain, the faint glow of passing lights all fading into the background as his words settled into place. Mine. Not said loudly. Not said with force. Just stated. Like a fact. I shook my head, even though he could not see it. You do not get to decide that, I said, but it came out softer this time, less certain. I already did, he replied. No hesitation. No shift in tone. Just quiet certainty. My chest rose and fell too fast, my thoughts tangling over each other, trying to find something solid to hold on to. Then why let me go? I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. This time, the pause was different. Not strategic. Not calculated. Almost thoughtful. When he spoke again, his voice dropped just slightly, not in volume, but in something deeper, something that felt like it reached through the line and settled right under my skin. Because I wanted to see if you would. Choose me back. My breath hitched. The road blurred again, not from speed, but from the sudden, overwhelming realization that settled in my chest, heavy and impossible to ignore. This was not about control the way I thought it was. It was worse. Because somehow, in a way I did not fully understand yet, he believed I would come back on my own. And the most terrifying part was that I did not know if he was wrong. I did not answer him right away because I could not, because something in my chest had gone too tight, like the air itself had turned solid, and I was trying to breathe through it. Choose him back. The words echoed, not loud, not dramatic, just persistent, threading through every thought I tried to form. I stared at the road ahead, but I was not really seeing it anymore. Just streaks of light and shadow blending together as my mind kept circling the same impossible point. He thought this was a choice. He thought I would come back. My fingers loosened slightly on the wheel, then tightened again, like my body could not decide what it was supposed to do. You are wrong, I said finally, but it came out quieter than I intended, less like a statement and more like something I was trying to convince myself of. I am not choosing you. The silence that followed was not sharp or cutting. It was patient. That was what made it worse. Victor did not rush to argue. He did not push. He simply waited, as if time was something he had an endless supply of, and I was the only one running out of it. I exhaled slowly, forcing my eyes to focus, to pick out the lines on the road, the rhythm of the passing mile markers. 1, 2, 3. Keep moving. That was the plan. Just keep moving. Then keep driving, he said at last, his voice steady, almost gentle in a way that made my chest tighten again. Prove me wrong. My breath caught for half a second. There it was again. Not a command. Not even a threat. Just an invitation. And somehow that felt more dangerous than anything else he could have said. I pressed my foot down harder, the car responding instantly, the engine rising, the speed climbing past 60, then 70 miles per hour. The road stretched out, empty and open, like it was daring me to take it, to disappear into it. This was what I wanted. Distance. Space. A clean break. So why did it feel like I was running in a circle I could not see? My phone stayed against my ear, even though part of me wanted to throw it out the window, to cut the connection completely, to pretend this conversation never happened. But I did not. I could not. Because some part of me needed to hear what he would say next, needed to understand how he was so certain. You do not sound like someone who is leaving, Victor continued after a moment, his tone unchanged, calm, observant. You sound like someone waiting to be stopped. My grip faltered, just for a second, but it was enough. The car drifted slightly again before I corrected it, my pulse spiking. That is not true. I snapped, sharper now, defensive, because the words hit too close, because they landed somewhere I did not want to look. I am not waiting for anything. Another pause. Then, softer, almost thoughtful. No? I swallowed, my throat tight, my mind racing to find something solid, something that would prove him wrong, that would anchor me in this decision. No. I repeated, more firmly this time, even as doubt pressed in around the edges. The rain had started to lighten, the drops on the windshield thinning, the world outside becoming clearer in slow, gradual shifts. I could see further now. The road ahead, the distant exit sign coming into view. A small-town exit, gas station, diner, a place to stop, to regroup, to think. My foot eased off the gas again without permission, the speed dropping just enough to notice. I stared at the sign as it grew closer, my thoughts splitting in two directions at once. Keep going. Do not stop. If you stop, you hesitate. If you hesitate, you lose. But another voice, quieter, more insistent, slipped in beneath it. Just for a minute. Just to breathe. Just to figure out what comes next. You are slowing down, Victor said, and there was no question in it. My chest tightened. Of course he noticed. Of course he would notice something that small. I did not answer. I did not trust my voice not to give me away. The exit sign was right there now, the white letters bright under the highway lights. I could pass it. I could keep going. Nothing was physically stopping me. The road was open. The car was mine. The choice was mine. I turned the wheel. The motion was small, subtle, almost automatic. The car shifted lanes, the tires gliding over the painted line as I took the exit without fully remembering deciding to do it. The highway curved away behind me, replaced by a narrower road leading down into dimly lit streets and scattered buildings. My breath came out uneven, like I had just crossed some invisible line I could not go back from. On the other end of the phone, Victor was quiet for a long second. Then, very softly, "There you are." Something in my chest dropped. Not relief. Not fear. Something deeper. Because I realized, with a clarity that made my hands feel cold on the wheel, that he had not told me to stop. He had not forced me to turn. He had simply watched and waited for me to do exactly what he knew I would. The road narrowed as I descended into the small town, the streetlights spaced too far apart, leaving pockets of shadow that made everything feel quieter than it should have been, like the world had dimmed just enough to notice every sound, every breath, every thought that refused to settle. I slowed the car further, the tires rolling over damp pavement with a soft hiss, my fingers still locked around the steering wheel, as if letting go would mean losing control of something much bigger than the car itself. "This does not mean anything," I said, the words coming out more to fill the silence than to convince him, but I needed to say them anyway, needed to hear something that sounded like resistance. Victor did not answer immediately. He let the quiet stretch, let the weight of what I had just done sit between us. I pulled into the first place I saw, A small gas station with flickering fluorescent lights and a half-empty parking lot. The kind of place no one really notices, the kind of place I thought I wanted. I parked, but I did not turn off the engine. The low hum filled the car, steady, grounding, the only thing that felt predictable right now. You stopped, Victor said finally, and there was something different in his voice this time. Something softer, almost like acknowledgement, like he had been waiting for this exact moment. My jaw tightened. I needed gas. I replied quickly, even though the gauge still sat above half. The lie felt thin the second it left my mouth. He did not call it out. He did not need to. Of course, he said, and the way he said it made it clear he heard everything I was not saying. I stared through the windshield, watching the flicker of the overhead lights, the empty pump beside me, the distant hum of a passing truck on the highway I had just left behind. For a second, I imagined getting out, walking inside, buying something pointless just to prove that I could still move freely, still make small decisions that were mine. But I did not move. My hand stayed on the wheel. The phone stayed pressed to my ear. My body stayed exactly where it was, like something invisible had settled over me, not holding me down, but keeping me in place all the same. You are thinking about leaving again, Victor said quietly. My breath hitched before I could stop it. He was not asking. He was observing. I swallowed, my throat tight. I can leave whenever I want, I said, but it lacked force, lacked the certainty I wanted it to have. Another pause. Then, gently, then why have you not stepped out of the car? My eyes closed for half a second. That's small. That's simple. And I had no answer. The air inside the car felt warmer now, heavier, like it was pressing in from all sides. I opened my eyes again, focusing on my reflection in the rearview mirror, the tension in my expression, the way my shoulders sat too high, too rigid. I did not look like someone in control. I looked like someone waiting. Waiting for direction. Waiting for permission. The realization hit harder than I expected. I am not waiting for you, I said, quieter this time, almost under my breath. I know, Victor replied, just as soft. You are waiting for yourself. The words settled in a way I could not push away, slipping past every defense I tried to build. My fingers loosened slightly on the wheel, then tightened again, like I was caught between two impulses that refused to align. Outside, the wind picked up just enough to rattle a loose sign near the edge of the lot, the sound sharp and brief before fading back into the quiet. I stared at the gas pump in front of me, the numbers glowing faintly, the hose hanging still and used. Everything was still. Too still. Adrian, Victor said again, and this time my name felt different, not like a call, not like a claim, but something closer, something steadier. Look at where you are. I frowned slightly, my gaze shifting around the empty lot, the dim lights, the quiet road beyond. You chose a place that no one remembers, he continued. Somewhere temporary. Somewhere in between. My chest tightened. I had not thought about it that way, but now that he said it, it felt obvious. Of course I had. I had not chosen a destination. I had chosen a pause. You are not leaving, he added softly. You are hesitating. The word landed heavier than anything else he had said so far. Hesitating. Not running. Not escaping. Just pausing. My breath came slower now, deeper, but it did not ease the tension sitting in my chest. Because he was right, and I did not know what to do with that. The engine idled quietly, the lights flickered, and I stayed exactly where I was, caught between the road behind me and the one I had not yet chosen, realizing with a slow, unsettling clarity that I had not actually gone anywhere at all. The silence inside the car stretched so long it started to feel like something solid, like if I moved too fast it would crack and everything I was trying not to face would come rushing in at once. So I stayed still, fingers resting against the wheel, phone warm against my ear, listening to the quiet on the other end like it held something I had not figured out yet. I inhaled slowly, then let it out just as carefully, trying to steady the rhythm of my breathing, trying to convince my body that nothing had changed, that I was still in control, that I could still leave whenever I wanted. The problem was, I was no longer sure that was true. Say something, I muttered under my breath, not even sure if I meant it for him or for myself, because the silence was doing something to my thoughts, stretching them thinner, making every possibility feel heavier. Victor did not rush to fill it. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, not in volume, but in something deeper, something that felt closer than before. Step out of the car. The words were simple, calm, not forceful, but they landed with a weight that made my chest tighten again. I glanced at the door handle, then back at the empty lot in front of me, the flickering light above the pump, the faint outline of the store windows reflecting nothing but dim shapes. Why? I asked, my voice quieter now, more cautious than before. Another pause, shorter this time, like he had expected the question. Because you keep saying you can leave, he replied. So prove it to yourself. My fingers twitched slightly against the wheel. Prove it. Not to him. To myself. I swallowed, my gaze shifting again to the door, to the simple motion it would take to open it, to step out, to move. It should have been easy. It should have been automatic. But my body did not move. My shoulders stayed tense. My hand did not reach. The realization settled in slowly, like something sinking beneath the surface where I could not pull it back up once I saw it clearly. I was hesitating again, not because I could not move, but because I did not know what moving meant anymore. Adrian, Victor said softly, and there was something in the way he said my name this time that made my chest tighten in a different way, less sharp, more steady. You are not afraid of me. I frowned slightly, my grip tightening again without thinking. You have no idea what I am afraid of, I replied, but the words lacked the edge they should have had. I do, he said just as calmly. You are afraid that if you walk away, you will realize there is nothing out there that feels like this. My breath caught, sharp and immediate, like the words had found something I had not meant to expose. I stared straight ahead, refusing to look at the door now, refusing to give the thought more space than it already had. That is not true, I said quickly, but it came out weaker than I wanted, thinner, like it was already unraveling. He did not argue. He did not push. He just let it sit there, let the doubt expand in the quiet space between us. Outside, the wind shifted again, brushing lightly against the side of the car, a soft, almost absent sound that made everything else feel even more still. You left because you thought you were losing control, Victor continued after a moment, his tone steady, measured. But you did not lose it. You gave it away the moment you started thinking about me when I was not there. My chest tightened again, the words settling deeper this time, harder to push aside. I had not meant to think about him. Not at first. It had happened gradually, quietly, until it was no longer something I could ignore. I exhaled slowly, my hand finally lifting from the wheel, hovering for a second before dropping to my lap. A small movement, but it felt bigger than it should have. You think you know everything, I said, but there was no real bite behind it now, just something softer, something closer to uncertainty. No, he replied. I just pay attention to you. The simplicity of it made my chest feel tight again, like something had shifted slightly out of place, and I could not quite fix it. I glanced at the door one more time, then back at my reflection in the mirror, at the tension still sitting in my shoulders, the hesitation still written across my face. Slowly, almost without thinking, I reached for the handle. My fingers wrapped around it, cool metal against my skin, the smallest movement sending a ripple through the stillness inside the car. I paused, just for a second. Then I pulled. The door opened with a quiet click, the outside air slipping in, cooler, sharper, carrying the faint scent of rain and asphalt. I stepped out, the ground solid beneath my feet, the space around me suddenly wider, quieter, more real. And for the first time since I had left the city, I realized something that made my chest tighten in a completely different way. I had not stepped out to leave. I had stepped out because he told me to. The air outside felt colder than I expected, sharp against my skin, slipping under my jacket and settling there like a reminder that I was no longer inside something controlled, something contained, and yet the freedom I thought I would feel did not come with it. I stood beside the car, the door still open behind me, the faint hum of the engine continuing like it had not noticed anything had changed, like it did not care whether I stayed or left. My grip tightened slightly around the phone, my eyes scanning the empty lot again, the flickering light above me casting uneven shadows that shifted with every small movement. I am outside, I said, my voice quieter now, steadier but still edged with something I could not quite name. On the other end, Victor did not respond immediately. The silence returned, but it felt different this time, less distant, more focused, like he was watching even though I knew he was not physically there. I know, he said after a moment, and the certainty in his voice made my chest tighten again. I exhaled slowly, turning just slightly, my gaze moving toward the road beyond the station, the dark stretch that led further away from everything I had left behind. It was still there, still open, still waiting. I can keep going, I said, more to remind myself than to convince him. My feet shifted slightly against the pavement, a small movement, but enough to feel the weight of the ground beneath me, solid, real. Yes, Victor replied, calm, unchallenged. You can. The words landed without resistance, without contradiction, and that was what made them heavier. I frowned slightly, my eyes narrowing as I tried to find the catch, the angle, the part where this turned back into control. Then why does it feel like I cannot? I asked before I could stop myself, the question slipping out softer than I intended. There was a pause, longer this time, like he was considering how to answer, not whether to. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, closer in a way that made my chest tighten differently. Because you are measuring freedom by distance, he said. And that was never the thing holding you. I swallowed, my gaze dropping briefly to the ground, to the faint reflection of light on wet asphalt, the small ripples where the rain had not fully dried. Then what is? I asked, almost under my breath. Another pause. Then, simply, attention. The words settled in slowly, like it needed time to unfold, to reach all the places it was meant to land. I lifted my head again, my brow tightening as I tried to make sense of it. That does not make sense, I said. But even as I said it, something in my chest shifted, like it recognized the truth before I did. It does, Victor replied, patient as ever. You are not here because you had nowhere else to go. You are here because you are still listening to me. My grip on the phone tightened. That was not the same thing. It could not be. And yet, I had not hung up. I had not walked away. I had stepped out of the car, but I had stayed connected. I turned slightly, my gaze falling back to the open door, to the empty driver's seat waiting exactly where I had left it, like nothing had changed, like everything had. Hang up, Adrian, Victor said softly, and the words landed sharper than anything he had said before. I froze, not because he raised his voice, not because he forced anything, but because he did not sound like he expected me to do it. He sounded like he already knew I would not. My thumb hovered over the screen, the call still active, his name not even displayed, just the unknown number that had somehow become the most familiar thing in the past few minutes. If you want to leave, he continued, just as calm, then leave completely. My breath came slower now, heavier, my thoughts pulling in two directions again, one pushing forward, one pulling back. This was it. This was the moment. Not the highway, not the distance. This. I stared at the screen, my thumb barely moving, the smallest shift sending a pulse of tension through my chest. Just press it. Just end it. It is simple. It is nothing. But my hand did not move. The silence stretched again, but this time it felt like it was coming from me, not him. Because he was right. I had not left. Not really. Not in the way that mattered. My thumb lowered slightly, then stopped. I exhaled slowly, my shoulders dropping just a fraction, the tension shifting but not disappearing. You see, Victor said quietly, not triumphant, not mocking, just certain. I closed my eyes for a second, the truth settling in deeper than I wanted it to. Then, without thinking, without planning, I spoke. Where are you? The question came out softer than anything else I had said so far, but it changed something the moment it existed. Because I was no longer asking how to leave. I was asking where to go. The question hung in the air between us, heavier than anything I had said before, because it was not defiance, not resistance, not even confusion anymore. It was direction, and I felt the shift the moment the words left my mouth, like something inside me had quietly realigned without asking for permission. For the first time since I had gotten in the car, I was not looking at the road ahead or the one behind me. I was waiting for him. The realization settled slowly, uncomfortably, like a truth that had been there the entire time, but only now decided to show itself clearly. Victor did not answer right away, and the silence that followed felt different again, not distant, not testing, but almost measured, like he was considering the weight of what I had just asked. My fingers tightened slightly around the phone, my other hand hanging loosely by my side, the cool night air brushing against my skin in quiet, steady waves. Adrian, he said finally, my name softer this time, almost careful, and something in my chest tightened in response. Not sharp, not panicked, but steady, grounding in a way I did not want to examine too closely. Do you hear yourself? I frowned slightly, my gaze dropping to the pavement, to the faint reflection of the overhead light shimmering in uneven patches. I asked a question, I replied, but my voice lacked the edge it used to have, lacked the certainty I had been holding on to earlier. You asked for a destination, he corrected gently. That is not the same thing. My breath slowed, the meaning of his words unfolding gradually, like each layer revealed something I was not prepared to admit yet. A destination, not an escape, not distance, something else. I shifted my weight slightly, my shoes scraping softly against the asphalt, the small sound louder than it should have been in the stillness around me. Then answer it, I said, quieter now, almost stubborn, because if I stopped pushing, even a little, I was not sure what would be left. Another pause. Then, calmly, look to your left. My head turned before I could think about it, my eyes scanning the edge of the lot, the dim outline of a parked car I had not noticed before, tucked just beyond the reach of the flickering light. It had been there the whole time. I felt something in my chest drop, slow and heavy, like gravity had suddenly remembered me. The engine was off. The windows were dark. It looked ordinary. Too ordinary. You are not. I started, but the words caught in my throat before they could form properly. I told you, Victor said quietly. I do not need to chase you. The air felt colder now, sharper, slipping under my jacket and settling deeper this time. My eyes stayed fixed on the car, on the stillness of it, on the way it seemed to exist just outside the edges of everything I had been paying attention to before. How long? I asked, barely above a whisper. I was not sure I wanted the answer. Since you took the exit, he replied. No hesitation, no attempt to soften it. Just the truth, delivered exactly as it was. My breath hitched, subtle but enough to make my chest tighten again. He had been here. Not behind me. Not following. Waiting. The difference mattered more than I wanted it to. I swallowed, my throat dry, my mind trying to catch up with what that meant, with how easily everything I thought I was controlling had shifted without me noticing. You said I could leave, I said, my voice quieter now, less certain, because the words felt different in this context, felt thinner, like they no longer held the weight I had given them before. You can, Victor replied, just as calm, just as steady. I have not stopped you. I let out a slow breath, my gaze still locked on the car, on the invisible line between where I stood and where he was. Because now I knew. He was there. Not abstract. Not distant. Real. Present. And he had not moved to close the distance. He had not stepped out. He had not forced anything. He was simply waiting. Then why does it feel like you already know what I am going to do? I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. The silence that followed was brief this time, almost immediate in its response. Because you do, he said. My chest tightened, the words landing with a quiet finality that left no room to argue, no space to deny. I stared at the car for a long second, then another, my feet still planted where they were, the distance between us unchanged, and yet something in me had already started moving, already leaning forward in a way I could not quite stop. I took a step. It was small, barely noticeable, but it was enough. Enough to feel the shift, enough to understand that I was no longer standing still, and the most unsettling part was not that he had expected it, but that I had, too. I should have stopped after that first step, should have felt the shift and pulled back, reminded myself that I still had a choice, that nothing physical was forcing me forward, but my body did not listen to that logic. It moved again, another small step, then another, each one quiet against the pavement, but loud in my chest, like every inch forward was confirming something I had been trying not to admit. The distance between me and the car was not far, maybe 20 feet, but it felt longer, stretched out by everything sitting in my head, every thought trying to catch up with what I was already doing. My grip on the phone loosened slightly, but I did not pull it away from my ear, did not end the call, did not break the connection that had somehow become more real than the empty space around me. You are walking toward me, Victor said, not surprised, not amused, just stating it like he had been watching the entire time, like there had never been another possible outcome. I exhaled slowly, my breath visible for a second in the cool air before fading, just like the resistance I had been holding onto earlier. I am walking toward a car, I corrected, but the words felt thin, like they could not hold their own weight anymore. The outline of the vehicle became clearer as I moved closer, the dark paint reflecting faint streaks of light, the windows still too dim to see through, but no longer distant enough to pretend I did not know who was inside. I stopped a few feet away, my feet finally still, my chest rising and falling a little faster than before, my pulse steady but heavy. The car did not move. The door did not open. Nothing changed. And somehow, That stillness felt intentional, like it was giving me space to decide something I already had. You could still turn around, Victor said quietly, and there was something different in his voice now, something that did not push, did not pull, just existed, waiting to see what I would do with it. I looked back over my shoulder for a second, toward my own car, the open door, the empty driver's seat, the engine still running, a clear path still there, still available. Nothing had disappeared. Nothing had been taken away. The option was real. The distance was small. All I had to do was walk back. My foot shifted slightly, the smallest movement, a pause caught between two directions. Then I looked forward again. The car in front of me did not change. It did not react. It simply remained, quiet, steady, like it had been there longer than I had noticed, like it would stay there whether I approached or not. My hand lifted slowly, not reaching for the handle yet, just hovering for a second in the space between decision and action. "Why did you come yourself?" I asked, my voice quieter now, less guarded, because the question mattered in a way I could not fully explain. Another pause, shorter this time, closer. "Because this is not something I send someone else to handle," Victor replied, his tone even, but carrying something deeper beneath it, something that settled differently in my chest. I swallowed, my fingers lowering slightly, brushing against the smooth surface of the door, the cool metal grounding in a way that made everything else feel sharper. "You said I could leave," I repeated, but it sounded different now, less like an argument and more like something I was trying to understand. "I did," he said simply. "And you did." My brow tightened slightly, confusion threading through the tension. "Then why am I here?" I asked, the question softer now, more honest than anything I had said before. The answer came without hesitation this time, quiet but certain. "Because you did not leave me." The words settled into place, not loud, not dramatic, but final in a way that made my chest tighten, my breath catching for a second before easing out slowly. I stood there, hand resting lightly against the car door, the distance between us reduced to something almost insignificant, and for the first time since I had started driving, I understood what he meant. I had left the city. I had left the road. I had left the idea of escape. But I had never left him. My fingers curled slightly against the handle, the decision no longer something ahead of me, but something already made. I pulled the door open. The door opened without resistance, smooth and quiet, like it had been waiting for that exact moment. And the first thing I noticed was not him, not his face or his expression, but the stillness inside the car, the kind that felt deliberate, controlled, like every detail had been placed exactly where it was supposed to be. I stood there for half a second longer than necessary, my hand still resting on the edge of the door, my breath steady but deeper than before, as if my body was adjusting to something I had not fully processed yet. Then I looked at him. Victor sat in the driver's seat, one hand resting loosely against the steering wheel, the other relaxed near his lap, his posture composed, effortless in a way that made everything else feel sharper by contrast. He was not leaning forward. He was not reaching for me. He was simply there, exactly as he had always been, calm, certain, unshaken by anything that had just happened. His gaze lifted to meet mine, steady, unreadable at first glance, but there was something beneath it, something quieter, something that had been there all along but felt clearer now that I was standing this close. "You found me," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them, softer than I intended, almost reflexive. A small shift crossed his expression, not quite a smile, not quite anything defined, just a subtle acknowledgement. "You walked to me," he corrected gently. My chest tightened at that, the difference settling in deeper than I wanted it to. I stepped closer, the movement slow, deliberate, until I was standing fully within the open space of the door, the faint scent of leather and something distinctly his settling into the air around me. It was familiar, too familiar. I had not realized how much of it I recognized until now. "You said I could leave," I said again, but it no longer sounded like a challenge, no longer carried the same resistance it had before. It sounded like a question now, something I was still trying to understand. Victor's gaze did not waver, his expression unchanged, his voice just as calm as before. "You did," he replied. "And you came back." The words were simple, but they landed with a weight that made my chest feel tight, my breath catching for just a second before settling again. I frowned slightly, my fingers tightening against the edge of the door as I tried to find the right response, something that made sense of what had just happened, something that gave me back the control I thought I had lost. That is not the same thing, I said, but even as I spoke, I could hear the uncertainty in my own voice. Victor tilted his head just slightly, the movement minimal but enough to shift the space between us in a way I could feel. No, he agreed quietly. It is not. The acknowledgement caught me off guard, my thoughts stalling for a second as I tried to process it. He was not arguing. He was not correcting. He was simply stating it. I exhaled slowly, my shoulders lowering just a fraction, the tension shifting but not disappearing. Then what is this? I asked, softer now, more honest than anything I had said before, because I needed to know, needed to understand what I had just stepped into. Victor's gaze held mine, steady, unwavering, and for the first time, there was something clearer in it, something that felt less like control and more like certainty, something that did not need to be forced because it already existed. This, he said quietly, is you choosing to stay. The words settled between us, not loud, not dramatic, but final in a way that left no room to pretend otherwise. I stood there for a moment, the weight of it pressing in, not suffocating, not overwhelming, just real. My grip on the door loosened slightly, my body no longer leaning back, no longer caught between two directions. I looked at him again, really looked this time, at the calm in his posture, the steadiness in his expression, the complete absence of doubt. He had known, not because he forced it, not because he controlled it, but because he understood something about me that I had been trying not to see. My hand shifted, releasing the door as I stepped fully inside. The movement quiet but decisive, the space around me closing in not as a trap, but as something defined, something chosen. The door shut with a soft click behind me, sealing the moment in a way that felt less like an ending and more like the beginning of something I had already been moving toward long before I realized it. Victor did not move right away. He did not need to. He simply glanced at me once more, his voice low, steady, certain in a way that no longer felt like something to resist. If you run again, he said softly, not a threat, not a warning, just a quiet truth. I will still be right here. And for the first time, I did not look at the door. I did not think about leaving. I just sat there, the weight in my chest settling into something steady, something unfamiliar but not unwelcome, realizing that whatever this was, it was not something I had been caught in. It was something I had stepped into on my own.